Next up, we have Rhiana, who's going to take us behind the magic of CSS.
Yep, hello. Here we go. I'll just share my screen.
So, thank you.
Here we go. Cool. Can everyone see that? Yep, cool. All right, so my name's Rhiana, and I'm a software developer at Blake eLearning. If you've got kids and they use reading eggs, that's where I work. So, you know. Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about CSS Houdini. I've done a lot of work in CSS. I really, really like it. And this is, it's kind of like a new, it's kind of coming out the last few years. It's CSS Houdini. Basically what it is, it's a little hard to explain, but what it does is a series of APIs. So there's 7 different APIs, and they let you code directly into the browser. So you can talk to the browser and you can make your own CSS properties, which is pretty unbelievable, I thought. It also allows you to kind of play around and see how CSS properties are made now, and how they actually work. And you can kind of see the code behind the scenes and how it's all made, which is really cool. So the main API I'm going to be talking about today is the Paint API. This is the one that has the most browser usage, and it's the one where you have the funkiest examples. So here are some examples that some really creative people who aren't me have made. This is at csshoudini.rocks. Fantastic website if you want to get into Houdini. They've got examples for all the different APIs. Yeah, they're really nice. They're really interactive. These are a couple of ones that I thought were really pretty. And so this is where they're making custom backgrounds with CSS Houdini. So with different like color shadings, different shapes, all that sort of stuff. This is another website, Extra CSS. This one also has a lot of really good CSS Houdini background ones as well. Again, really creative, really interactive. The person who made this one has also done a few other talks on CSS Houdini that can give you kind of a more broad overview. Today, I'm just going to be looking at the one API. All right, so where could this be useful? This is the example I came up with. I'm not a designer, so I just came up with something quite simple just to kind of show how it works and how you can use the API. So say that a designer has come along and given you a new button to put on the website. So instead of rounded corners, which are standard, everyone has rounded corners, which is a standard property in CSS. Instead, make them straight corners. So this is not something you can currently do in CSS natively.
Turn on the ring.
Sorry?
Okay.
Yes. Carry on.
So this is not something you can do in CSS natively. So I had to think about a couple of ways to do it and a couple of ways that I've seen done. So one of the ways that I've seen done is having background images, which is, yeah, it's okay. But it does mean you have extra downloads. It makes them hard to interact with if you want to put animations on. They're not particularly responsive. It makes it hard for screen readers to read them out, and you kind of have to have lots of different images depending on like how long your text is and stuff, and it can get quite clunky, that one. Otherwise, CSS hacks. I love CSS hacks. I think they're really fun, but it does sometimes mean you have to add in extra DOM elements, so even pseudo elements like before and after, or extra spans or extra divs, or just a bit of extra clutter. That makes your markdown a bit less semantic, a bit harder to read. And the CSS, while you kind of understand how it works at the time, 6 months time you look at it and you're like, what did I write? Like, how am I going to update this and maintain this? So yeah, CSS hacks. I did find a couple that almost work for this scenario. So you can do some with like borders and masks and stuff, but I didn't find any that really fit the bill. So Houdini is a nice option. Why not use Houdini? That's what we're talking about today. So these are all the different APIs. As I said, it has the 7 APIs. This is a site called Is Houdini Ready Yet? This is a very good resource. There's a lot of it's hard to tell from the picture, but all these, like, there's a bunch of clickable links on here, which gives you a ton of extra information. We're looking at just the Paint one today. It's the one that's the most ready to go. It works on, Chrome, Edge, Opera, even Samsung Internet for some reason. It doesn't work on Mozilla and Apple yet, unfortunately, but hopefully it'll get there, and this will be one we can actually use in real life, which is really exciting. Otherwise, it is quite easy to put a fallback, so you can always have the original design as your fallback. So this is how I think of the Paint API. It's where you take your CSS and your JavaScript, you add in your CSS Houdini wizardry, and you get Microsoft Paint, which I really like and gives me a lot of nostalgia. But the way I think about it is that anything you can do in a Paint type program, that's the kind of thing you can do with CSS Houdini. So you can draw lines, you can draw rectangles, you can draw circles, you can have it transparent and just do the border, or you can, fill it, get your little filly tool and fill things in different colors, all that sort of stuff. So basically, anything you can do there, you can do with CSS Houdini, using your JavaScript and your CSS together. All right, so this is my demo. Let's just see if I can. All right. Zoom controls have taken over. But this is my demo here. So this is just in CodePen. I'll put a link to it at the end. So this is just using raw HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's nothing else here. There's nothing you have to install. There's nothing extra you have to do. So it's really agnostic. You can use this wherever you want. So the way to set it up is that you have your JavaScript, which does all the code, all the drawing. You reference that in your HTML like this, CSS Paint Worklet add module, and just put like your link to your module. So this JavaScript file, it's a worklet rather than a true JavaScript file. So it only has access to some things and not other things. So this did throw me a couple of times. I tried to use some things that, it didn't have access to, but on the plus side, it makes it really, really fast. So that's just how you register it here. So I registered it as border corners. And then in my CSS, this is all it is. It's really not very much CSS. So what I've got here is I've got my background. If there is no Houdini, put the background color, put the border radius. Then I've just used my supports media query. So if it does support a Paint API, do the Houdini code. Otherwise, if you open this up in Firefox, you'll just see the original button with the border corners. With the border radius. This is the CSS Houdini code here, which is just background paint border corners, because that's what I've called it. And then down here, I have added in a couple of CSS variables, and these CSS variables will talk to my JavaScript code to tell it what to do, basically. So these are the things that I've said are optional. You can chuck them in and you can do stuff with. So one thing is corner size and one thing is background color. So if I made this, I don't know, really big, that's going to look really silly, but I can update the corner size and it will do different things. It's not quite big enough to do that. I really need to put in some checks and balances in here, but I can update it to be a different number and with the variable, and it will just do that. I'd like this way of doing it too, because it means that if you have buttons of different colors, you can then just give the different variable to that particular class. I've also got some hover styling here. So on hover, it should go purple and change the corner size to 20. So you can do that on different interactions. It makes it really easy to animate, and you can do it for different custom classes as well. So it can make it like quite atomic classes there. And that's just random CSS. And then this is the magic part here. So this is all you need to set up. You register your class, you give it a name, in this case border corners. You get your input properties. So these are our CSS variables that we had in the CSS. So this code here and this code here is just all it is getting it from the CSS and making it available to play with in the JavaScript. And then we have this context styling here, and this is the part where it's the MS Paint stuff. So this is where you can do all the different things. If you've used Canvas 2D rendering, if that, it's basically the same ones there. I've got a good resource at the end for it. So in this case, what I've done is begun path, move to here, draw a line, draw a line, draw a line, close the path, and then I did fill it up with the color, whatever the color is. So that's all there is to it. So these ones take the 3 properties: context, geometry, and properties. So properties are these. Geometry gives you height and width, which is cool, makes it really, really responsive. And context lets you use all the really cool context rendering things. And yeah, this is just figuring out where to draw the lines. I'll put this one back to 10, so it's a bit, or 12, a bit easier to see. And yeah, you can kind of see, if you just kind of comment a couple of random lines out, you'll see it draws a completely, different shape. So you can draw kind of whatever shape you like if you're more creative minded than me. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for that one. Yeah, so this is one so I'll link this one to the end too. So basically anything in the context one, any of these functions you can put in there, drawing rectangles, text, line styles, strokes, you can put borders in there, different stroke width, shadows, all sorts of really creative things. All right, let's full screen this one again. Okay, so can we actually use this? Yeah, it doesn't have the browser support for most of us to use. Yeah, a lot of us still have to support IE, and yeah, some like really old iOS devices and stuff. So unfortunately, yeah, it does have the advantage where you can have your fallback, which is really cool. So it is, you can do some progressive enhancement there, and the browser support is increasing. When I first heard of this a few years ago, the browser support was about 4%, and now it's at about 40 to 50%. So it is increasing, and I think we'll see more of it as time goes on. The other thing I found difficult with this is that there were very few learning resources about it. There were some good higher overview ones talking about all the different APIs, which was really cool, but I did find it quite hard to get started, which is why I wanted to do these talks and do like some really entry-level demos so people can really get into it. Some of the pros is that it's really fast. It's really deliberate. You're doing exactly what you want to do. It's giving you a lot of control. What you're writing and what you're doing is exactly what you expect, unlike having a CSS hack, for example, where you're not quite sure why you need an extra input here, or why there's an extra label there, or whatever. Don't look at my code. Yeah, so it gives you a lot more control, and it does let you do things that new things that weren't possible before. It's really up to you what you create with this, which I think is really, really exciting. Yep, so I'll just put my resources in the chat. Yep, but feel free to check out my slides. I've got my resources here. Is Houdini ready? These two ones are the best examples I found for CSS Houdini resources. A lot of them have the source code there as well, so you can go in and you can copy and paste it, and you can play around with it once you get things set up. And this one in particular, CSS Houdini Rocks, has examples for all the different other APIs as well. So they've got ones in for borders and masks and gradients, because you can do things like you have a linear gradient and you can animate it and stuff like that. It's a really cool website, that one. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rhiana. That was excellent. As a couple of people have said, I myself hadn't actually heard of CSS Houdini, and I feel like I live and breathe CSS some days, much to my own disgust. So that was really interesting. We had a little bit of a discussion, just confirming you were using a variable for cyan. Was that just a CSS or some other preprocessor? Or
yeah, that was just
also Houdini?
No, that was just a normal SAS variable. Sorry,
yeah,
I should have mentioned that.
No, that's okay. Just the
But
question
you can
was
do this
asked,
with
so.
you can do this one without SAS or anything.
Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, if we all look closely, we could see it was index.scss.
Yeah.
That would be far too much detail for us to take in. I don't think I saw any other questions. If I did, shout out. I guess my only question is, I assume that it's pretty safe in terms of fallback if you do use it. You know, that if it just won't do the extra little thing that you wanted it to do if they're in a non-compatible browser.
Exactly, especially for the Paint API, it's just making things look a certain way. It's nothing to do. It's not going to hinder functionality. It's not going to hinder accessibility or anything like that. It's just how the background looks.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fairly safe one to do for progressive enhancement. Designers might disagree with me and probably will disagree with me, but
well, the designers shouldn't ask you to do such fancy designs.
So fancy, I know these corners. Yeah,
we've all had some absolute corkers, haven't we?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Rhiana. That was excellent.